let's start developing our use of curves now into creating cylinders. So I've just drawn a simple cuboid and divided the top into 4, and you can see that the opposite corners are the same. So like we covered in the last tutorial, we want to make sure that we're starting along the line and finishing along the opposite line, nice and even curves. And if we do the opposite sides together first, we know that they're going to be a mirror image of one another. Then you rotate your page so it's nice and simple, and we go on to creating these fairly flat, modest curves on the other side. And you can see that we've then got a very accurate circle in isometric. You would then want to do the base. So if we draw the square into the base as well in perspective, making sure our lines are going to these imaginary vanishing points, which hopefully those are, we can divide it into 4 as we did with the top, and then put our curves in, so starting and finishing along lines, nice and light to start with, and you can darken it up later. But we're doing opposite sides are mirror images of one another, and the top, that mirror of the bottom there. Okay, and once you've done the top and the bottom quite accurately, you can then join it up with these lines down the edges. So we're going to just draw down this side and down this side, and you can see that we've then gone from a cuboid to creating our cylinder quite accurately. And if we thicken up the lines in here, we'll be able to make it stand out as we have with every other type of drawing. There's nothing special about these in terms of thick and thin lines. Landing boxes, they work in exactly the same way. So let's go again. So we're starting with our cuboid. So start with your vertical edge, and we're going to draw this one slightly larger. You just need to make sure if you are doing a cylinder, you have a square side to your cuboid. The cross section needs to be square, otherwise your circle's going to not work properly. You can still do it, but it would become an oval. Okay, so let's divide this up now into 4 to there, and if we draw the base in at the same time, we're going to do both at the same time. So we're just recapping what we've done on the other. So we're going opposite sides first, starting along and finishing along the line with an even curve. Okay, and we're going along the top. And once you've done this a few times, you can then start to draw these circles more freehand without dividing up the squares and without having to think about these opposites being similar, because you'll learn the shape of that oval a little bit more effectively, and you'll be able to replicate it. If you're drawing it from the top or from either side, it looks slightly different, and so you just learn which way the circle squashes to make it look isometric. And you can see that these circles go from looking at square on this way, when you're looking at them from the top, they become an oval that way, and if it was from the side, the oval would be that way. And you can start to sketch in perspective with circles just much more freehand, much more readily. So now let's say we want this to have a hole in. We would then repeat this circle or this shape in this area here, keeping a nice even gap around all of them edges. Okay, we want that indent just to go slightly deep, so I'm just going to copy then that next curve in this gap here, making sure it's wrapping round. And you can see now we've got an indent in the top of our cylinder. My lines weren't overly straight coming down the edges or overly vertical, so you can see it's created a few issues moving on. But what we can also do now is we could create from our perspective drawing. I'm just going to go for a very thin cuboid this time, so as we're projecting this way, we're keeping the lines close together. We're going to do more of a flat disc. So divide this into 4, draw your curves in, making sure that we're starting and finishing along the lines. That's the important bit, so that they don't look squashed, and you're trying to get that curve nice and even too. We're then going to project that through from the most outer parts, and then if we do it with these quarters too, you can see where these quarters touch. I've just projected through. I'm going to mirror or replicate that curve in here, and this part of the curve here is just tucking under on that side, and it's the same at the top here. We're just actually tucking in to that line, and you can see we've created a flat disc. You could then, if you wanted to, project this through and create more shapes on the back of this. So if we project this through here, and the line should just be converging very slightly, so I'm going to move that one up there. You can then create this cuboid on the back, and you could have that cuboid attached to the cylinder, or you could then work through quartering that up and curving that as well. Let's leave it as a cuboid attached to the cylinder for now. Darken the edges that we'd like to keep. So we're just using our thick and thin line technique, remembering that spider rule, of course. Darkening all of those outer edges, make that stand out, so you can see that we've got that effective cylinder used on the front and attached to a more complicated shape. We've used cylinders to cut away parts within here and then built our circle. So if you want to practice drawing these, the best way for that is just drawing a square in perspective and then practice quartering that up nice and quickly and getting these circles, or these perspective circles, really accurate. And once you've mastered drawing those, so draw as many as it takes until you master the skill of doing it, it'll be much easier for you to work with curves and to create cylinders within your designs. And we'll look at combining shapes to create more product design ideas in future tutorials. But this is probably the trickiest part really of perspective sketching and takes more practice, but once you master it, it's extremely useful. Good luck.